Everyone, and welcome to the May 19th Planning Commission meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'd like to ask that roll call be called and introduction of new Planning Commission members. It's not on the sheet here. See? I know. It's not here on the agenda. Upon advice of council, I'll ask everyone's forbearance. Would you please rise and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I can't win. Okay, where was I? So I'll ask staff to call the roll.
Chair Lowry.
Aye.
Member List.
Aye.
Member Friend.
Present.
Member Wolf.
Here.
Member Roby.
Present. Thank you. So, just to clarify for everyone here, if you don't have a program to keep track of the players, City of Placerville Council reappointed on May 5th member John Lust and appointed Daniel Roby and Peter Well as new Planning Commission members. So we'd like to now move on to item 2.2 and ask for the recognition of outgoing Planning Commission member Michael Drobish.
Thank you, Chair Lowry. We have a very brief presentation for him. If he wants to step forward, it's a certificate of appreciation. Mr. Drobish did step forward back in 2013 to address the call to become a planning commissioner and served almost exactly 2 years to the day. And we're proud that he did so. We did learn a lot, I think, from each other. And I know he's been active before he became a planning commissioner, and I'm sure he will in his time as a regular member of the public. So thank you very much. Perhaps the other members would like to say a few words as well, but we do have a certificate of appreciation for his time.
Wonderful. Just want to thank you for your service, Michael.
Before you sit down, as I told Mike the other night, I appreciated as a first-year commissioner being able to watch someone that seemed to have some background and knowledge, and I appreciated the way that you taught me how to get through some meetings. So thank you very much for your service.
I wanted to give a thank you to my fellow commissioners from the past, and like you know, that it was a great honor and even greater pleasure serving amongst you. And what couldn't have been done in 30 minutes, we managed to stretch out to 2 or 3 hours. And I'd also like to thank Mr. Painter and Mr. Rivas for their tireless efforts and solid staff reports. And the vast amount of information that you have to have at the ready is just truly mind-boggling. And finally, to all that are not involved with the Planning Commission, I'd like them all to know that the City of Placerville is very well served and in very capable hands with this commission, and thank you for your service.
Thank you. Next up is the adoption of the agenda.
Move to adopt.
Second?
Second.
Third. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, adoption of minutes. In this case, there'll be only two current Planning Commission members who were here who can approve the minutes,
And I'll move to adopt. Mr.
and I'll second that.
Okay. And we are in concurrence to move the minutes as
Okay.
approved.
Okay, that moves us on to item 5, items of interest to the public. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the commission on any matter not on the agenda that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. State law prohibits the commission from acting on items not listed on the agenda except by special action of the Planning Commission under specified circumstances. The chair reserves the right to limit the speaker's time to 3 minutes. The chair will recognize the speaker and ask that they state their name for the record. Personal attacks on individuals or comments which are slanderous or which may invade an individual's personal privacy will not be tolerated. So it's at this time, if anyone has any items not on tonight's agenda they wish to speak to, you are most welcome to come to the lectern and discuss them.
Kirk Smith, Placerville. I was here on a couple occasions earlier this year and just wanted you to know that I was very impressed with what I observed. Not that anybody needs to know that. But what I really liked was it was clear that there had been a lot of study and interest on the part of all of you. I think it was Mr. List I met for the first time. And although your view was a minority view at that night, and while I in substance didn't agree with it, what I loved about what you did was you gave reasons, you gave facts, you gave a principle for what your position was, and that's the kind of thing that we really appreciate. It kind of reminiscent of the Bank of America controversy that some of us can remember when people like Herb Cain bemoaned the Manhattanization of San Francisco when the Bank of America tower came up. And ultimately, your view, by the way, was in essence what seemed to be followed by the second session, where it was kind of like, and again, the applicant did a very effective job by showing lots of photographs that show there's tremendous diversity around. Whether that should or shouldn't be the case, especially when it comes to Main Street, Placerville, or some other venues, that's something to be examined in the future. But I really appreciated your position, the reasoning and the facts that you offered for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Does anyone else have any not agendized topics to discuss tonight? Okay, well, we'll move on to item 6, and that's communications.
Yes, staff provided the members this evening with, I believe it was 3 separate communication items. First, and this directly relates to one of the items on the agenda tonight. It's a May 11th letter from Lawrence Stoliker. He's a neighboring property owner adjacent to the Forney Road Hotel project. 1 page. A second document, a March 19th, 2015 letter from the Housing and Community Development Department of the state of California addressing the city's housing element and its compliance status update. That's also, it's a 2-sided 1-page document. Third document provided to you is a resolution 8285 and the corresponding staff report prepared by Susan Zito that back on the March 10th City Council meeting. This resolution relates to the suspension of the Historical Advisory Committee and transferring the duties of the Historical Advisory Committee to this body, the Planning Commission, and staff. Staff will briefly discuss that item during the reports of staff at the end of the agenda. That's all I have, Chair Lowry.
Thank you, Mr. Painter.
One question on this letter from Lawrence Stacker, is it? Do you know which parcel is his? Do you have any idea?
His parcel would be directly east. His parcel shares the easterly boundary of the project site.
Thank you.
It's located in the county.
Thank you very much. So that moves us down to the public hearing section, item 7.1. This project is a major change to site plan review 0803 Forney Road Hotel. At this point, I'll hand it over to staff.
Okay,
Yes.
Mr. Chair and the rest of the commission, before we proceed to this item, I just want to make a disclosure that, as many of you know, I'm an architect, but in the spirit of transparency and full disclosure, I think it is wise to inform the commission and the public that many years ago, 17 to be exact, which is about half of my architectural career ago, I was a contract employee of MFDB Architects in Sacramento. They were only MF then, but they became MFDB, and I worked for them for about a year on hotel and fire station projects. MFDB architects prepared some of the exhibits and documents in our program tonight, so they're obviously actively involved in the project. The projects that are on tonight's agenda. But since ceasing work with MFDB Architects, I've had no professional or financial relationship with the firm. I do not believe there's any conflict of interest in being part of tonight's discussion, and I do believe that in good conscience, fairly and objectively, I can participate in reviewing these agenda items. But I just wanted to share my past. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wolf.
Mr. Chairman, before we proceed, because I noticed that we have three specific items related to this project, and we're going to get into them in due course. But I guess the question I have for staff, what I don't see here for this evening, and frankly this item has come and gone a few times and I don't recall all the iterations, there isn't a lot of discussion or analysis about the visual component of this project. The architectural features, we have a few drawings, and we got tonight we got a sort of color rendition, and it just seems to me that given the prominence of this facility in the gateway to Placerville, that the architectural and visual presentation is going to be a fairly significant element. And I'm just kind of wondering why we didn't have, it didn't seem like we have a lot of discussion, analysis, or presentation on that.
well, the requests before you this evening, if I may,
Sure.
don't relate to the architecture of the building with the exception of the building height, because the building aesthetics were approved by the Planning Commission back in 2010 with
Okay.
conditions.
All right. Wow, yeah, so I didn't try to go digging back through old boxes in storage on 2010, and I'll be the first one to say that I don't recall everything. And I just think that since this project, I'm not speaking against the project, but it's taking a long time to get here for a variety of reasons. It just seems like there would be some value in having a redescription of that. I know it technically then would not be within our purview because it's already been approved, but I think it would be good to have kind of a revisitation of that. If nothing else, perhaps the applicant could just kind of describe it. I do think the visual component is significant. So anyway, thank you for that indulgence.
I'm sorry, Chair Lauer, would you like me to begin?
Please.
Okay. Yes, tonight's request, the first item, item 7.1, involves it's a major change to site plan review 0803 by the property owner involving amendments to condition numbers 43 and 44 of the Planning Commission's January 19th, 2010 approval. These conditions require road widening along the site's Forney Road frontage and disabled pedestrian access from Placerville Drive to the hotel front entrance. The property owner seeks an amendment to condition 43 that would reduce the asphalt pavement width from 28 feet down to 24 feet because of the existing Forney Road frontage hillside and slope conditions, and that the site does not offer much room for expansion because of its adjacency to US Highway 50. Condition 44 requires the provision of pedestrian access meeting the Americans with Disabilities Act or ADA standards from Placerville Drive to the front entrance of the hotel. To meet this condition, the applicant has proposed the use of a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week shuttle service during hotel operations that would transport users to the El Dorado Transit stop at Forney Road near Low Highway, which is approximately 1/3 of a mile northeast of the hotel site. The applicant further seeks Planning Commission approval of building elevations for the sewer lift station that's proposed for the site in conjunction with, again, Site Plan Review 0803, and that's condition of approval number 2, that those elevations come back before the Planning Commission for your review, consideration, and approval. The city seeks an amendment also to Site Plan Review 0803 as it relates to condition number 27. This condition currently states that the public, or in this case the city, would maintain maintain the responsibility of maintaining the sewer lift station on the site. Staff is suggesting that the commission change that to read that the applicant or property owner would serve to construct and maintain to such time as the city wishes to take it over for various purposes. The site is owned by Forney Road Business Park, LLC. The property owner does have their agent, Jim Fisher. He is in the audience this evening. The location is 3110 Forney Road. It's south of the intersection of Forney Road and Placerville Drive in the westernmost portion of Placerville, sitting right on the city-county limit boundary. The lot size is approximately 3.3 acres and has a general plan and zoning designation of highway commercial. Back in 2010, when the Planning Commission approved the request, they also approved a mitigated negative declaration for the project, which mitigated potentially significant impacts to a less than significant level, and also provided some project conditions that will need to be met as construction of the site occurs. The project extends from Forney Road to the south. So Forney Road is its north boundary. The Weber Creek is the south boundary of the site. To the east is unincorporated El Dorado County, and to the west is US Highway 50. Site elevations range from 1,670 feet at Forney Road down to 1,534 feet at Weber Creek. Vegetation on the site includes oak and pine tree species, various shrubs, and native and non-native grasses. An overhead utility pole and line, parallels the eastern property boundary. There are 2 billboard structures on the property. These were approved by the city back in 1997 under conditional use permit 1997-01. There's one billboard on the southerly end of the property and one in the northerly end near the hill that is right below Forney Road. As I mentioned earlier, back in 2010, the Commission conditionally approved the project and adopted a mitigative negative declaration. And this project involved a 4-story hotel of approximately 74,500 square feet of floor area. It involves site grading, on-site parking, exterior lighting, building, business signage, and landscaping. Also a sewer lift station to serve not only this site, but a entitled and not yet expired residential project involving over nearly 40 units, as well as Forney Road street improvements consisting of curb, gutter, and sidewalk. The Site Plan Review 0803 will expire on January 19th of 2017. As I mentioned, properties to the west and south and even to the east are located in the county. These are designated low density residential and are zoned RE5, 5-acre minimum. They contain dispersed single-family residences. To the north and northeast are parcels in the city, and they contain some single-family residential uses, as well as the Forney Road Shopping Center, which is zoned highway commercial. In terms of the request tonight, condition number 43 states that Forney Road shall be improved from the south curb return of the new site access road up to Placerville Drive with curb, gutter, 4.5-foot sidewalk, 28 foot of AC pavement, 16 feet from lip of gutter to center line, 12 feet on either side of center line, and drainage swales and guardrails as necessary. Street structural sections shall be designed based on traffic index of 7.0 for collector streets. The existing street section shall be evaluated by a geotechnical engineer and given an ACL overlay as recommended to meet the standard. Staff met with and discussed with the applicant's modification request. Staff agrees that there are physical constraints due to the site's proximity to US Highway 50 and the grades of the site and that of Forney Road. Staff also agrees that the city's hillside street standard, which a copy of which we provided for you on the wall behind you, is applicable to the Forney Road and the site's street frontage. Staff therefore recommends that condition number 43 be revised, reducing the overall pavement width from 28 feet to 24 feet. The other revision would require curb and gutter be installed along the south side of Forney Road as indicated on pages 3 and 4 of tonight's staff report. Condition 44 states, pedestrian access meeting ADA standards shall be provided from Placerville Drive to the front entrance of the hotel. The applicant has evaluated possible ways to achieve this accessible access from Placerville Drive, and at the request of the city, they analyzed several different options, including an at-grade access to the not yet completed Class 1 bike path along US 50. They also evaluated a sky bridge from the top story of the hotel over to Forney Road, a path access across the neighboring property to the east located in the county, and an outdoor lift attached to a staircase which would be up, if installed, would be up along the hillside behind the hotel up to Forney Road. Each of these alternatives have financial, operational, and topographical challenges that were discussed by the applicant and the agent, Jim Fisher, in his November 3rd, 2014 letter. The applicant has proposed a shuttle that would meet accessibility requirements under the California Building Code for the hotel use. The shuttle would serve the hotel very well as a hotel amenity in staff's opinion for not only guests, but also staff members. Staff envisions that the shuttle could be served to serve transport users to and from the county fairgrounds during events, perhaps to Placerville Drive or downtown or the Broadway Village to enjoy shopping, dining, and other entertainment opportunities. However, pedestrian access from the new use to a public street is a site plan review criterion under City Code Section 1049. It is also emphasized under the city's pedestrian plan. The construction of a pedestrian access from the hotel to Placerville Drive, in staff's opinion, should be required to meet the intent of not only City Code, but the pedestrian plan. Staff is therefore recommending that condition number 44 be amended to require a pedestrian access to a minimum of 4.5 feet in width from Forney Road, from the Forney Road sidewalk, which the applicant will need to install, and the Forney Road improvements required under condition 43 to the front entrance of the hotel. Per condition number 2 of approved site plan review 0803, the commission is also requested to review and approve the proposed building elevations for the sewer lift pump station. The sewer lift station is designed to serve the needs of the hotel and the needs of future development within the immediate project area. The pump station comprises approximately 280 square feet of floor area. It has a gabled roof design with using metal roof materials, and it has split-face CMU block exterior walls. The metal roof materials, the gabled architecture, and the use of the split-face CMU wall block components are similar to and complement those used on the hotel. The hotel includes roof gables, has stone veneer, and the CMU block construction is also used as it relates to the trash enclosure and other site improvements. Therefore, the harmony of style and materials is therefore achieved amongst the buildings on the site, which meets a site plan review design criteria under 1049G, as in George, number 4, subsection C, and that the exterior elements and material guidelines within the Chapter 4 of the Development Guide. Staff therefore recommends approval of the sewer lift station elevations as they've been submitted by the applicant. The staff is also requesting that, as I mentioned earlier, a revision to condition number 27. And this modification would, again, remove the city's responsibility of ownership and maintenance of the sewer lift station and direct that responsibility to the property owner during when a maintenance assessment district is established. Then it could be deferred to another entity, including the city. This condition currently states that the station will be publicly maintained, as I mentioned. Staff suggestions suggest that the commission approve the modifications to conditions 27, 43, and 44 as discussed this evening and shown on pages 6 and 7 of staff's report, and approve the sewer lift station elevations as presented by the applicant. As I mentioned, Mr. Fisher is in the audience this evening. That concludes my staff report. If you've got any further questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
So there are any questions from commissioners to staff at this time?
Yeah. If I understand correctly, we're asking them to put curb and gutter and sidewalks on both sides of Forney Road from the north corner of their property clear up to Placerville Drive. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
No, it's on one side. It's on,
I can't hear you.
I apologize. Hello, good evening. It's on one side, and it is on the side that is the closest to the frontage of the hotel.
Someplace it said on the south side, which would be the opposite side of the street, is the way I read it. So we're looking at both sides of the street.
To the south.
Right.
Yeah, no, the intent is that the sidewalk be placed on, adjacent to the frontage of the hotel. The hillside standard, per the city, street standards, it's, and I believe that there's a copy up there, just behind you. It does show, placement of one sidewalk.
Okay, so it's just on the one side.
Correct.
Okay, just some thoughts. How far down Forney Road, if our city boundary continued on down Forney Road, how far down would a person have to be before he wouldn't be responsible for putting sidewalk clear up to Placerville Drive?
It's basically a point of logical termini for a pedestrian. If there's nothing beyond that point, it's also not fair to condition the applicant to put in additional sidewalk beyond their frontage, because, you know, in a perfect world, we'd be able to have sidewalk everywhere. But it's a logical point of termini, basically a pedestrian destination being that of the hotel.
Okay, now who owns that property from their property line up to Placerville Drive on that side of the road?
Private side?
Right. They own it clear up to Placerville Drive?
Yes.
Wow, I didn't catch that.
Yeah, it's
If I can add, if I may, Mr. Chair, basically, any project that comes forward, if there's frontage doesn't meet the minimum city standards, the city has the ability to impose that the frontage improvements be made for a project to meet the city standards. So this is not atypical. This is a typical condition.
Okay. Yeah, I was under the assumption that their property stopped at the corner of where we're looking at here, and then all the rest of the way to Placerville Drive, it was someone else's property.
It's my understanding
state
that all
property or-
the frontage improvements are being made on the applicant's property, not beyond.
Okay,
So from the driveway apron, maybe this will help, from the driveway apron that would come down into the hotel site, to the north and northeast, as you approach and head towards Placerville Drive, yes, that's all on the property owner project site. So it doesn't change ownership until you get up to the overcrossing of Placerville Drive and the intersection where,
okay.
yeah.
Just to, Mr. Chair, if I may, just to make sure I understand, and it might help everybody else. The site plan, it's incomplete in the sense that it stops here and it does keep going. And so it doesn't, it's incomplete on that side.
But to the right is Weber Creek.
Mr. Wolf, can your microphone go with you?
No.
I'm
Is that removable?
going to restate what I just said. It was a misstatement. Looking at the map again, yes, that is the property owner, extent of their property does not extend up to the intersection. I was mistaken. That is actually Caltrans right-of-way. But the city has the right to require these street frontage improvements. And this project did go and was circulated to Caltrans for comment, and they had no issues with the installation of a sidewalk.
If they're not paying for it, I can see why. The second question I have is on the lift station. If the city of Placerville takes hands off, it belongs to the owner, what requirement and where, and I didn't find it anywhere, would require them to allow the development across the street to tie into that lift station?
The term for it escapes me, but thank you. Yeah, it's a maintenance assessment district is what's typically formed. The first one in line installs the improvement. And for a project like this and the size of this particular pump station, it is designed to serve not only this hotel site, but back in 2010, there was envisioned a nearly 40-unit single-family subdivision, and they were going to utilize this pump station as well. So it's been oversized to serve adjacent the neighborhood. An assessment district can be formed at the discretion of the developer, and at such time when a development wants to tie into that system, that entity who created the assessment district would be reimbursed for those connections and what have you that subsequent users wanted to do. So the developer's on the hook for building it and maintaining it, but this particular type of assessment agreement allows a new user or tapper into to utilize the system, and the property owner would be reimbursed for some of that cost.
Okay, that was my question.
Yeah.
Any other commissioners?
Well,
Mike?
so I just want to pick up on that, because I did have a problem with reconciling the statement at the bottom of page 4 that said the sewer lift pump station to serve the hotel and needs of the future development within the immediate area. It was issued as a statement there. And then it says on page 5 at the bottom, the proposed sewer lift station current designated use will only be to serve the hotel property. So there was a clear problem between those two statements. So really what you want to say on the bottom of page 5 is there has been a change in the original arrangement as approved back in 2009 or 2010. I'm now debating the dates because the staff report has a 2009 date. So that has been changed for the reasons that you stated, Andrew, in responding to Commissioner List. I guess the question I would have there, I suppose that the advantage to the city is the city is not responsible for maintaining this structure until such time as the other parcel is developed. But does this give the applicant, if they own this structure outright, responsible for it outright, what controls or parameters are in place to make sure that whatever is charged to the future development is reasonable?
Well, there's a couple of ways that it can be done, and I'll first I want to speak to the the staff's position as to why we are not accepting this as a private or public lift station. It would only serve currently the Forney Road Hotel, and our position was that we have enough within our own infrastructure to maintain and operate on a daily basis, and doing so for one user and one property was not in the best interest of the city's resources and available funding. Now, with that, and I've seen it done several different ways. You can do the actual cost of construction, and what ends up happening is you come up with a joint development agreement between the other parcels. That's one option. The other option is to do the maintenance assessment district that Mr. Painter spoke to. And so we could do several options, and of course, we would work with the applicant as far as that goes. But the cost share, it might actually be a prorated amount based on their annual O&M costs as the station becomes operational.
O&M operation and maintenance?
Correct.
Okay.
And so that might be, so there might be the initial cost of construction that the other developments have to essentially buy into for their share. And it can be based on, service connections or EDUs or basically just estimated usage. So they could do the cost of construction or do a prorated share based on that, and then they could add in the operations and maintenance costs as well. That would be what I would recommend, but ultimately, since they are the owner, they would have to work it out with the development, and the city would oversee the development of the maintenance assessment district.
Okay.
They are required to design and build the lift station to our preference and our standards, though.
All right. Then the other comment I wanted to make, and it's on this same item, and if I can just provide a tangent, Commissioner Wolf and I believe were on the commission that approved this project originally. Commissioner Wolf reminds me that he made the motion and I seconded it, and which is all fine. I have no problem with that. I think the disadvantage that we have goes back to Commissioner List's question about the property, and the fact that we don't have a more expansive site plan review here is because it's been such a long period of time over which this project is covered, and so we're getting actually a smaller subset than what we might normally otherwise have, and so I think it puts some of the commissioners at a disadvantage. Having said that, and this actually kind of gets back to my earlier comment about the exterior elevations, because tonight we're supposed to approve the pump station elevations as shown in Figure 2, and to concur with the assessment of staff that there's harmony of style and materials used, which makes it a little bit difficult since there isn't a whole lot of information regarding the large structure aside from this color palette that just came here this evening. And I have to say, and this is just for the other commissioners to consider, that what was offered in Figure 2 is fairly minimal in terms of an actual description to take action on. So the other commissioners may feel that this is more than adequate, but really what they gave us for this review is not a whole lot. There should have been a little bit better rendition, and probably a color rendition, because that's one of the things that we're supposed to be determining, that there is in fact harmony in materials and color and structure. So I'll just make that observation. And I'm not speaking against the project. I'm really happy we're going to get a hotel, but at the end of the day, particularly given the visual location of this facility, I think it's really important to kind of be focused on that. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Friend. Commissioner List?
One follow-up question for our city engineer. Is there the remote possibility that the neighbor across the street that said they wanted to put 40 houses in there decides that, no, I'm going to put in 5-acre parcels and come back to the city and change that and ask to put in septic systems? Would that be permissible? And my reason for asking this is we're asking this developer to put a lot of money into a lift station. I've been involved with them before. They're expensive, and especially if you're going an oversized one, you're getting in a lot of expense. And if I was a developer, I'd want some assurance that down the road, and it may not be 5 years, it may be 10 years, 20 years from now, that property across the street, whatever's built on there is going to have to tie in to help me offset my cost. So is there that possibility that could change?
While while the staff is coming up with a question, I do want to address your comment, Commissioner List, about could the developer come in with large parcels and seek septic. Because of their close proximity, my understanding under city policy, they would be required to hook up to the city sewer system, and they couldn't install septic system.
You mean proximity to Weber Creek?
proximity to a city sewer line.
Oh, gotcha.
Existing infrastructure. I mean, we are a city, so we provide for that higher level of service.
Thank you.
Just to piggyback on what Director Rivas mentioned, yes, he's correct. And the project that's across the street is, in fact, at this moment, an active entitlement, and it is currently conditioned to tie into it. So as far as that goes, there, you know, as far as what you've stated proposing, that could that happen? Not per city standards.
Great. Do we have any more questions from commission to staff? Right. At this point, I'd like to invite the applicant's representative to come to the podium and experience the same process.
Thank you. Jim Fisher with REY Engineers. I guess going back to the 2010 approval to kind of answer some of the background questions you guys had. Yeah, at that time we did a pretty thorough analysis of the exterior. I think we even did several photo simulations. At the time it was and still is, sounds like, you know, obviously the exterior of a hotel at the entrance to Placerville is very important. So we did several photo simulations from areas throughout to try and depict how much of the building and what parts and how it would look with the background around it. And that was all part of the approval back then. Fast forwarding to now, we actually started these most recent discussions in fall of 2013 with staff. At that time, Mr. Cimarelli with Forney Road Business Park, you know, saw the economy rebounding and decided that it was time to kind of dust this project off, so to speak, and see, you know, what it costs in today's dollars to build and does it make sense. And part of doing that is trying to reduce down, maybe not reduce down, or check off some of the conditions that we can to get so we can get a more solid cost of the project. You know, one of the larger ticket items, well, two of them are the offsite improvements on Forney Road, and then also how do we get ADA accessibility from a road that's 30 feet above the finished floor of a project. So we spent, you know, quite a bit of time, and you know, I mean, staff, I think it started probably slower, you know, every few months we'd get back and forth, and then about the middle of last year, you know, the urgency on Cimarelli's side picked up, and then we're here today. The reason for the delay from the earlier commission, I think one in particular was just it was running long, and we pushed it, and then you know, we had some further discussions with staff with regards to operating, you know, the operation and maintenance of the lift station, and then also the Forney Road condition. We just wanted to come to you one time with this first set of changes or clarifications or checking off some of the conditions all at once. You know, I appreciate, you know, you guys taking kind of the devil's advocate side on some of the conditions, because truly it does, you know, there are additional costs that weigh on projects, and yes, this project agreed to prior and is continuing to agree to frontage improvements that aren't necessarily along its frontage. There also, I talked to Mr. Cimarelli, and he's fine with taking on the O&M costs in the interim. You know, certainly if we were able to figure out maybe a duration in case no one ever ties in, that might be helpful. But at this time, you know, given everything else, you know, we've been asking for too, I think he's willing to take those costs on with the hope that, you know, oversizing it and being ready for the potential project across the street, and then even another project adjacent to it that I think zoned highway commercial that would also potentially tie into the lift station if it were to happen. You know, your questions about analyzing the elevations of the lift station compared to the building, I mean, I completely understand where you're coming from that. I think one nice thing about where the lift station is located is it's actually pretty well tucked down away. May not, you know, look at initially on the site plan, but vertically speaking, it sits down. The way that the the access road comes in and kind of ties into that first set of parking lot, we actually lose grade between that upper parking lot and the finished floor of the hotel down to the finished floor of the lift station. So it gets tucked even further down below. So visually, you aren't going to see it very much coming into the project, and also visually from Highway 50, it's actually in a pretty secluded location. Most of which, because the way the hill falls away there, we had to lower that part of the site down as best we could. Yeah, and working with staff on Forney Road, the applicant, asked us to update our cost estimate, and so we have to look at all costs on and off site. I mean, those 4 feet, it's amazing how much that's going to save, given the constraints of Forney Road. So I think, hopefully we can, and be happy to answer any questions with regards to that. We've actually done it's probably more than a preliminary topographic survey of the area, and we've actually taken the time to do some preliminary engineering of those frontage improvements, and feel that this reduction in width requirement is actually a pretty substantial savings that will hopefully, fingers crossed, get the cost down to where they can actually build this project. So I'd be happy to answer any questions as best I can. I know I was part of the project as kind of project engineer way back when, so at least I have some background, and now taking it from here. So,
Well, thank you for that. Commissioner Friend, would you like to ask some questions of the applicant?
No, Commissioner Wolf and I were discussing whether or not approval was coming back with the landscape details, but it's been bifurcated by staff as indicated in the staff report. That was our discussion. But thank you. No problem. Thank you.
Commissioner Wolf. Commissioner List.
In all of your studies of this property, did you do a traffic study, the amount of traffic on Forney Road at this point versus what it will be when you move onto the site?
I believe so. I would have to go back and look, but I'm almost positive a traffic study was done. I know that there are actually at least 2 potential offsite improvements as a result of that. I think one in particular was on the north side, or west side, I guess, so to speak, of where is it, Ray Lawyer maybe, or the intersection right across. Well, I think the hope is with the Placerville interchange, the first phase of it, and so I think that's mitigated some of that problem. The other issue is the left turn onto Forney, I think from Forney, I guess, so to speak. And I believe there's a condition to that effect in terms of if that does not, post-project does not work, I think we may have to go to like a right turn only or something. I'd have to refresh my memory with the conditions. But yes, traffic analysis, like 95% sure that we had done one at one point, because I know that we had some conditions to that effect.
It's referenced in the mitigated negative declaration. There are 6 mitigations related to traffic and circulation as part of the adopted M&D back in 2010.
Chair Lowry, if I may, I just want to make sure that we don't maybe find ourselves going off track, mainly because this project is entitled, the hotel project, the use was approved under a mitigated negative dec. There was a traffic study done as part of that mitigated negative declaration, and there were mitigations then applied to the project that are still conditions of the project. But a traffic study would not be relevant to the variances and the changes that are before us today.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Wolf and I would like to give comfort to the other members of the commission that we did a thorough review of this project, and you'll be quite satisfied with our analysis and the conditions
We're
that we
delighted
put
to know that,
thereon.
Commissioner Friend. Does Commissioner Roby have any questions of the applicant? Thank you very much. Okay, well, that wraps that portion up. I'd like to ask, thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask anyone here from the public who wishes to speak upon this application, please come to the lectern now.
I think I'm the only one here. If any of you have any discomfort in the piecemeal approach, having looked at aesthetics some years ago, believe me, I think members of the public would as well. When you're talking about the height of the building, the way the road's configured, whether it goes 24 feet instead of 28 feet, how you accommodate ADA issues, having a van come in, all those do relate to the appearance. This is one of the most significant projects I can imagine coming across your path in a long time. And it's not just because of the way it's going to add significantly to the tax base for the city that professes to have a great need for money. That's important. But this is the first appearance you get of Placerville as you come in on Highway 50. As it is now, you have 3 objects that stand out. 2 billboards and then a big sign for Office Max. But now with this, it's going to be the gateway into Placerville. Other sections beyond it are much different. For example, last year, the city council allowed the lease to expire for the other billboards that were near that other intersection. But you have these billboards and you have this kind of appearance that's a dramatic change. And that really concerns me. I think the height's too great. You're making accommodations for the way they address ADA issues that Main Street doesn't get the benefit of when it comes to bulb outs. I think I'm speaking against the wind. It's a tough project. It's not to say that any of you, and I don't believe any of you, have made up your minds. I don't think you prejudged it. But it's tough. It's a lot of money involved with this project, and it is a dramatic change in the landscape of this town. It is the first view you're going to have to come in, and aesthetics is largely what it's all about. If you do these things, you're not going to be able to come back and put the trees and landscape back. If you go out the driveway heading west from In-N-Out Burger, as I did today, you get this wonderful view for about 15 miles straight out easily of land that's largely without signs of development. It's there, it's just obscured by trees. That's all going to be gone when this project goes forward. So I think aesthetics is everything about what it's evolved. It's primary. And the design should be in such a way, if it has to exist, that doesn't alter that landscape that we have so dramatically changing now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your input. Well, without objection, I'd like to close the hearing at this point. Thank you for your support.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for staff. Pierre, I know that the landscaping plan is coming back to us. I don't see a reference as to any signage package. I assume there's not going to be a large neon minor 49er on the top of the hotel. But will there be a lighting package as well as a landscape package? That was just that's inferred. With the landscape, we'll get lighting.
Yeah, there are other conditions that they still
And
have
a
to meet.
signage, is there a signage package too, or no?
That will be coming back for you.
Okay,
as
so
well.
all that's going to come back to
Correct.
us. Okay.
Yes, we at this time do not know exactly what hotel brand would occupy the building.
Sure, fair enough. First of all, on the last speaker's comments, I'll just observe that some
So
of
we
those.
moved into the discussion portion then, Michael?
I guess that's not where we're at.
I
had a question for staff.
Okay.
Oh, I can yield, Mr. Chairman, sorry.
If you'd like to go ahead with the discussion. I'd like.
Well, just, so with regards to the last speaker's comments, I think actually some of those might have been, and they may get up again, more appropriate on one of the items we talk about, the height variance and so on and so forth. That one notwithstanding, I agree that the aesthetical considerations for this project are important, but we have largely dealt with them. The landscape and lighting plan will be significant. I'd like to commend the applicant, though, for pursuing a project on an extremely difficult piece of property within the city. Very challenging. There's a huge need for hotel space in this city. with Apple Hill and the various seasons and the seasonal recreation, it's really frustrating that folks don't have an opportunity for a decent place for lodging. So I really applaud the applicant. I find the considerations, particularly for the ADA and the driveway treatment and even the pump stations, to be perfectly doable. I don't see them as detrimental. I'm happy to support the proposed recommendations.
Any discussion from other members on the application? Commissioner Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Commissioner Friend. I mean, the horses are out of the barn in many respects on this project, in that it's legally entitled, and there's a lot of stuff that, in a perfect world we'd be looking at again, but the entitlements are already there. So there's just a few discrete things left. They're important, but we're going to get a shot at the biggest pieces of that, the lighting and the landscape, and I recall that we did have a fairly large presentation component last time and a lot of discussion about the colors and textures and materials and that sort of thing. I basically am comfortable supporting all of the agenda items. I'm a little saddened by the issue with the lift station. I've been there before as an applicant where, there's this very, very expensive item, but if you're first or last developing in an area, you're used to having to kind of eat that. So while I'm compassionate for the developer and the eventual hotel users, for a long time they're going to be the only users, and so I don't think it would be responsible for the city to take that on now. But it seems reasonable that the path is left open for the developer, the city, and the eventual owner of the project to kind of work things out with a benefit assessment district. Having been involved in projects where you come in and you're that person that needs to get into the benefit assessment district, you're never happy about that either, because there might be 3 or 4 other people that could have participated but somehow chose not to, and then so you have to kind of bite off a bigger chunk. But in this case, it seems like the only kind of reasonable project that will come along later would be that housing project, if that ever gets legs. And so it's just, I don't feel good about saying, oh, okay, Mr. Developer, you have to go spend $800,000 or whatever to make this big thing so your project works. But they're first. They're the ones that are going to get most of the use out of it for an unforeseeable amount of time. So I can support both the variances here for the ADA and the height variation. Given this, given the fact that the project's already entitled, another 2 feet in this very difficult space, or very difficult site, I think is going to be, it's going to be workable. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, well, at this point, I'd like to propose that, looking at page 6 and 7 of this agenda item, referring to 1A, 2, 27, 43, 44, and number 3, I'd like to propose that, and maybe I'm making a motion, Commissioner Friend will give me guidance in his role as parliamentarian, that I'd like to move approval of this application based on the facts as stated in elements 1, 2, and 3 on pages 6 and 7 of this agenda item.
I second that motion.
Discussion on the motion.
It was well crafted.
Okay. At this point, I'd like a roll call vote.
Chair Lowry.
Aye.
Member Friend.
Aye.
Member Wolf.
Aye.
Member List.
Aye.
Member Roby.
All right, well, let's move on to item 7.2.
Before we go on, Mr. Chairman, one announcement that should be made after each entitled project is that your action is appealable within 10 calendar days. So anyone out there watching or in the audience, your action that you just took is appealable to City Council.
I appreciate you making that reminder. Okay, so now we're ready to go on to item 7.2. All righty. This is, we're moving on to the compact parking variance at the Forney Road Hotel, and at this point, I will turn it over to Mr. Painter.
Yep, me again. I just gave you a few minutes ago a rather long description of the property, so I'm going to save you from having to hear that again. Go right into the crux of the request tonight. It does involve a parking variance. So the Forney Business Park LLC formally requests a 5% variance from the 20% maximum ratio, which is under our city code, that can be dimensioned at the compact parking stall of 7 feet by 17 feet, and that's a minimum compact standard. The parking is for, once again, the 2010 Planning Commission approved project site plan review 0803. The request, if approved, would result in 25% of the 126 total parking stalls would be constructed at the 8-foot by 17-foot dimension. That is the request. Once again, the minimum was 7 by 17. The applicant is proposing 25% of the overall parking stalls at a minimum of 8 feet by 17 feet in dimension. The standard parking stall, just for clarification and for interest, is 9 feet by 18 feet. The request is in response to condition of approval number 7 of SPR 0803 that requires the applicant obtain a variance for the total compact stalls submitted for the 2010 Planning Commission review, or revise their site plan to meet the city's minimum parking requirements. The project applicant has outlaid a response to their request, and the project does indeed have constraints to its development, including the slope that I talked about earlier, which ranges between 15 to 18% and as much as 30% to the south end of the site as it approaches Weber Creek. To counter the impact of slope, the site will need to be graded, and however, this grading will require retaining walls that would be necessary to support not only the hotel, but the site and hotel parking, the driveway access, as well as the sewer lift station, which you recently approved elevations for in the last item. To give you an idea of these retaining wall heights, they're going to range between 6 and 28 feet in overall height. So there are some substantial grading that needs to be done, and to shore up the grading, these retaining walls are necessary. Additional grading, if built at the minimum standard 9 by 18 dimension, could require additional grading to occur on the site in order to increase the pad to enlarge the parking stalls needed to meet that standard. Staff finds that due to that site slope, it is a constraint and would make it a hardship to conform to the 20% compact stall ratio. In terms of the overall number of stalls that would be permitted, the 20% up to 25% would just be an additional 7 compact stalls than would normally be allowed under our standard parking requirements. Staff therefore recommends that the Commission conditionally approve the variance 2015-01 by making the findings on page 5 of staff's report, including that the request is categorically exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, and subject to conditions 1 through 4 that are provided on page 6. Once again, the applicant's agent, Mr. Fisher, is in the audience this evening, and that concludes my staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Painter. We have Commissioners' questions for staff.
Mr. Chairman, I was actually going to make a suggestion that you go ahead and open the public hearing and dispense with that, and then we could ask questions of staff if we have any, and then do discussion afterwards. Might be
Sounds
more
good to me.
expeditious.
I'd like to invite any interested members of the public to come up and comment on this application.
Jim Fisher with REY Engineers. I'll make it pretty brief. I know 7 stalls doesn't really seem like a lot, and it's just 7 feet in the grand scheme of things. But a project like this, that's so constrained, it actually ended up being pretty much a necessity to fit the total number of stalls we needed into a site like this. We've got 2-tiered, or at least 2-tiered walls off the back that are pretty high to begin with, and we're still trying to accommodate water quality swales and fire truck turning radiuses and everything else. So be happy to answer any questions you might have regarding the site design challenges, but I can assure you we tried, but we're unsuccessful fitting all those full-size stalls in. But we did also expand our compact stalls a foot from the city standard width.
I'm not quite sure if this is a question for the engineer or for staff, but in this project, is everybody up against any floor area ratio restrictions in terms of the site coverage?
No.
Oh, okay, good.
Any other commissioners have questions? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Kurt, would you like to speak on this one? No. Okay. I guess that brings us back to questions for staff. Okay.
I'll take that as the public hearing is closed. Just one question for the record. Andrew, you talked about the retaining walls and gratings.
Yes.
And just to reiterate, we've already approved all of that, and this variance does not alter what we've already approved. Is that correct?
That's correct. If you were to deny the request, then the applicant would likely need to revise their site in order to accommodate the standard that you authorized tonight. Yeah.
So I'll just offer for my fellow commissioners in terms of my view on this. I think this is just a great example of where we do have to be flexible with the codes and restrictions that we put out. We have topography here in the city that's really, really challenging, and I think this is a reasonable accommodation to get a project to fit well, and then we can be flexible with the applicant.
Are there any more questions to staff?
One question. I'm not being involved. Is this on? Does it sound right? Okay. In the approval years ago, I'm assuming that the number of parking spaces is based on square footage of the. I guess my only comment here is I'm not sure how many of you have ever parked in a compact parking space and don't have a compact car. I was just wondering if there was any indication of any impact on traffic, or whether it's a hotel or a shopping mall. Would there be any negative impact having those compact spaces versus full-size spaces? Does that make sense? The question.
So this is a question to staff, and after we close it, when we start throwing it back and forth, I'll have a comment.
Okay.
That's a very good comment, I might add. For those of you that have parked in the compact parking spaces in the city's parking garage, maybe can understand that even a compact car may be subject to damage from being hit by the door of the adjacent car. So I think I just want to point out that the fact that the applicant on their own decided to make these compact spaces an additional foot in width, it goes a long way to, I think, ameliorating that kind of damage that is typical in the 7-foot width compact parking stall. And staff has discussed actually modifying the compact space dimension and increasing the width to 8 feet, because cars have gotten wider, cars have gotten bigger. I think the 20%, that's been the city standard for many, many, many years. Whether or not in any given commercial parking lot that the percentage of compact cars versus standard size vehicles is 20% is really unknown at this time. And it's maybe something that we could attempt to research and maybe revisit that ratio. But I do want to emphasize that the fact that the applicant increased it from 7 to 8 goes a long way to accommodating compact cars and larger cars.
I don't recall this number, Pierre, but in terms of a facility of this size as proposed and the number of parking stalls that are proposed, are they right at the number? Are they in excess of the number? Where are they with regards to that? Because we don't have that data here anymore.
I believe they are 1 stall greater than they are required to have.
Okay, so it's not a lot of room to do
No.
anything. Yeah.
I think it's 1 stall, if I recall correctly.
All right, fair enough.
Please.
Just a comment about the parking. I mean, it is challenging when you're trying to design these kind of projects, but I also see this particular agenda item as this is all on the owner, in the sense that they're trying to find that balance point on the number of parking spaces and the size. And it's not like a lot of developments where you go in and if you know, we're in a big strip center or large shopping mall, where if the parking spaces aren't acceptable in one area, you just move down a little bit and park there in somebody else's lot. That's probably not going to happen here due to the topography. They're not going to be parking at Office Max and walking down the hill. So it's just going to kind of be on the owner to figure it out. It's part of their business to deal with it. If it doesn't work, they'll start figuring out how to fix it. But we won't be negatively impacting the neighbors, I would suspect.
Okay, any other questions from commissioners to staff on this topic? Hearing none, I'm going to close the close the public hearing at this point, and move into the discussion. I think we've kind of moved into discussion already as a practical matter, but I did want to speak to your point about the compact spaces. I think we all know this. If we're talking about dimensions as specified and as seen in the parking structure, people don't use them unless they just have to park their Dodge Dually in there. And I certainly don't use them. It may be in the fullness of time, now that automobile manufacturers are now chasing a 54.5 mile per gallon corporate automotive fuel economy standard. We may be back to Yugos and Pintos, who knows? But for the time being, it's I think the flexibility that the applicant showed by acknowledging the reality of the situation and adding that additional foot, it favorably impresses me.
I'm actually going to ask a question of the applicant that it's outside of the public hearing, and also a question of staff. It just caused me to think of something. The city does not yet have a standard for electric charging stations, do we?
No, we don't. In fact,
I was thinking about Teslas, actually, when you were talking about that.
Just as a point of disclosure, I happened to be discussing that very issue with city engineer Neves, and we thought, what an amenity that a hotel would provide,
Yeah.
because they are coming long distance to get there.
Yeah.
But no, we do not have a standard, but the city does have charging stations within our
Yeah.
jurisdiction.
So I'm going to ask the applicant, just by a shake of his head, that I'll then reiterate for the microphone. Are there any charging stations planned in this? Not currently. Okay, so there are no currently planned, but is it possible that those could be considered? I would appreciate you conveying that, that suggestion, because I think it would be a good suggestion. I'm happy to move the recommendation, Mr. Chairman, unless you'd like to entertain more discussion, your discretion.
Staff has one further comment. I recall, because I was here, I was a staff planner back in 2010, and when the condition that was prepared by staff that involved this variance or to modify the site, and the applicant chose, of course, to approach the variance, I remember the members at the time, specifically Member Ogden, who at the time, you have to remember, in 2010, we were at the height of the recession, and gas prices were quite high. I think they were probably over $4, and I think there was a trend at that particular time that smaller cars were going to be coming forward, and alternative fuels and what have you. And so I remember that discussion. I just wanted to point that out, because that wasn't unnoticed. The condition wasn't unnoticed by the membership back years ago.
And I'll make it quick, Mike.
Sorry, take your time.
This discussion regarding the availability of vehicular chargers, it should be understood clearly, will in no way impact our decision tonight. I would just offer that it's probably amenity going forward that people are going to look for. The availability of this van shuttle from the hotel management, man, I'd be marketing the heck out of that to the disabled community. So anyway, thanks for that, and now I'll turn it over to Mike. You have the con.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Go ahead and move the recommendation to approve a variance which increases the percentage of compact stalls from the 20% ratio to a total of 25%, which is an increase of 7 stalls, with the additional 1 foot width as proposed by the applicant in those compact stalls. We make the findings of fact, Roman numeral 1, A through E is specified on page 5 of this, A through F, excuse me, specified on page 5 and 6 of the staff report, and the conditions of approval as specified under Roman numeral 2, 1 through 4.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
For clarification, who made the second? Thank you.
Another roll call vote for this, sir, please.
Member Friend.
Aye.
Member Wolf.
Aye.
Chair Lowry.
Aye.
Member List.
Aye.
Member Roby.
Thank you. That disposes of 7.2. Okay, well, let's proceed to 7.3.
I guess I'm up again.
You're up, Andrew.
I'm up again. Once again, this is a request by the Forney Road Business Park LLC. They are requesting to construct the hotel at a building height of 42 feet or 2 feet greater than the 40-foot maximum building height under the Highway Commercial Zone regulations. The height variance is needed by the applicant due to aesthetic guidelines for the hotel prototype and their intention to utilize variable roofline architectural enhancements and roof style to provide visual interest, to screen electromechanical equipment, which meets the city's site plan review and development guide design criteria. The request is in response to condition number 1 back on the Planning Commission's 2010 approval of SPR 0803 for the Forney Road Hotel site. City Code uses the definition of building height, which is found in the California Building Code, or CBC. It is the vertical distance between the finished grade to the average height of the highest roof surface. The Forney Road Hotel would have a roof deck surface that is scaled at 42 feet above the finished grade. The roof deck is defined under the CBC as the flat or slope surface on top of the building for the purpose of enclosing the story below. Roof decks do not include, under the CBC, vertical roof members, vertical supports, rooftop structures, or parapets. The hotel design includes rooftop parapets, as I mentioned, that reach up to 60 feet above grade. The roof deck, however, is the highest roof surface per the CBC for the hotel project as defined under city code. As mentioned back in the earlier item 7.1, the site elevations for the site range from 1,670 feet above sea level at Forney Road down to 1,534 feet above sea level at Weber Creek. Staff concurs with the applicant that much of the site is 10 feet below US Highway 50, that is located to the west, and as much as 30 feet below Forney Road, located to the north of the site. To further illustrate this, on the wall behind you are the hotel elevations in relationship to the existing built environment. I also provided to you this evening photo simulations which show the hotel in context of the surrounding vegetation and other infrastructure. The site characteristics and the desire of the applicant is to incorporate a hotel design that utilizes variable roof lines and roof style that screen roof-mounted equipment, as I mentioned, which meet the business needs of the applicant and operator, and that furthers the city's design criteria, which give rationale for the commission to approve the height variance, which would not be detrimental to the general public or adversely affect the general plan or grant a special privilege. During the public hearing, the city did receive a public comment from Lee Hollifield and Tina Hollifield-Helm, and that was provided to you as part of this item's staff report as attachment B, as in boy. Staff therefore recommends the commission make the findings on page 4 of the staff report to support the variance, including finding that the minor variance is categorically exempt from the California Minor Environmental Quality Act. Staff then further recommends the commission conditionally approve this variance, which is 2015-02, subject to conditions 1 through 4 on page 5 of staff's report. Once again, Mr. Fisher is in the audience this evening, and that concludes my staff report.
Thank you, Andrew. So this moves us to the point when commissioners have questions of staff. So, Michael, would you kick it off?
Well, I guess the only question I had, Andrew, is that in your opening remarks, which I could not correlate with the staff report, which is unusual, is you made a reference, I'm paraphrasing and correct me for accuracy, that one of the reasons for the request, in addition to the mechanical, hiding the mechanical, electromechanical components, was also because of a formula compatibility with the proposed hotel. And my question with that is, I thought we didn't know what was going in there, which relates back to my question on sign package.
Yeah,
Did I mistake?
The reference there is to the agent provided some substantiation for their request, and they outlined the hotel prototype, although I don't believe they use that term.
Hotel prototype, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, no, that's all I had, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Question for staff. Do we have either in our previous submittal from back in the 1800s, it feels like a long time ago, or in current documentation, what the floor-to-floor heights are in the project? Perhaps this is a question for the owner's agent as well. And you know, so I'm curious about what those floor-to-floor heights are, and are they all the same?
Yeah, I did not bring the 2010 graphics, but perhaps the agent, Mr. Fisher, can answer that.
When we reach that point, we'll go ahead and pose that question. Thank you. Okay. Commissioner Roby, you have any questions of staff?
Just I guess a point of clarification, since I did not, and to use a pun, get in on the ground floor on this project. As I understand it, the question is to allow a variance of 2 feet from 40 feet, the roof deck to 42 feet, but the overall height, including other structures, is 60, and I'm having a hard time reading this. 60 feet, correct? Yeah, just a point, is that correct? So the roof deck is 42 feet.
Correct.
But the overall height of the structure, including parapets, et cetera, is 60 feet, correct?
Yes, it's what it's scaled.
Okay.
Also on that graphic, getting to the previous member's question about the floor height, there is a graphical reference on sheet 5, which is behind you, on the left side of the front or west elevation. It's scaled at 12 feet at the first floor height, and each subsequent floor is 10 feet.
You can see it better on the wall.
Getting to Member Wolf's question.
Thank you.
Cool. At this point, I'd like to ask the applicant's representative to join us once again at the podium.
Jim Fisher with REY Engineers. I guess the first thing I wanted to point out is this is actually the same height that we went in with back in 2010. So we're not actually increasing the design from what was approved back then. We're actually just processing the variance, so to speak. So just so that when you look at the photo simulations prepared back then, it was for the same scale, and that's kind of where the prototype comes in. Is at that time they were in negotiations with that I think Spring Hill Suites was it at the time, and that's kind of what's been carried through. I don't know currently what hotel chains they're working with and whether it's the same one, but the goal is to obviously mimic the style that's being approved, that was approved, and will hopefully be approved again tonight. In our opinion, the additional height, and I know Mr. Smith was mentioning, how important this is as the entrance to Placerville, and the way we kind of look at the additional height is that it actually helps visually. I know that's not always the case, but a project like this that sits as far below its surroundings, Highway 50, Forney Road, we actually felt that the additional height and the varied roof line that we put forward would actually help the appearance of the project. So we're hoping that the variance goes through and actually an effort to improve the aesthetics of the project. But I'm happy to answer any questions of how we got here.
So the first thing I do is I'm going to make an observation and say how refreshing it is that the applicant is actually coming to the commission for a variance, as opposed to when Toyota told us this is what it's going to look like and you're going to either accept it or we're going to leave. So let's keep that in mind. So I appreciate the fact that you're actually coming to us for a request. If we were to not grant this request, then what are the ramifications?
I can't speak to that. I know that there's been a great amount of effort put into the plans that you're looking at today. And so the hope would be that we can move forward with the effort that's been invested to date. But I can't speak for Mr. Cimarelli and his group as far as what they would do.
It's only a 5%. It's nominal that way, but certainly any adding is more expense, it's more cost, material, labor, and all that sort of thing. So there has to be a reason why that would force you to pursue the variance. Sure. So that's a question, and I want to come back to it. Before I forget, I want to ask another question. Mm-hmm. I'm presuming that, because we're kind of dancing around this, what chain is going to go in here, and I no issue with that at all, but I'm going to operate on the assumption that other hotels of this shape, size, and configuration have also already been constructed elsewhere. And so I guess I have to ask the question, and you may not know, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. Are they all of the same height and dimension as being proposed this evening?
The short answer is I don't know.
Okay.
But I would hope that I would hope that we're going in with a variance that would apply to other hotel chains, since since that's what
Yeah.
it's been opened up to it now. But to go back to your initial question, perhaps the ramifications is that Spring Hill Suites is no longer an option, and he has to search for another hotel vendor. I don't know. Certainly, the reason to go to this roof height and vary roof line and exceed the height requirement was well thought out at the time, and I think a large part of it had to do with the hotel chain, but also achieving the varied roof line itself. So, but I can't speak to how much there was. Those negotiations were happening
Right.
without my knowledge, so I don't know.
So unlike the other variances and accommodations that you were included in tonight's meeting, there were compelling reasons, I felt, for making the allowances. To deviate from requirements is always it should never be taken lightly, and generally it's reasonable. But it would be nice if there was some compelling reason to do this one. And so I'm personally not hearing it yet. You may think of it in the course of the evening, and would invite you to raise your hand and say, I got the compelling reason. So no other questions, thanks.
And maybe if you can stay with us here at the podium, if I strike a nerve or something. I just know from personal experience, or professional experience rather, that there are other ways to kind of to build this. We're not looking at construction plans at this point. I'm assuming this is basically a frame building, a steel frame and wood and aluminum studs and that kind of thing, as opposed to a concrete structure. Because the reason I asked about the floor-to-floor heights is, the biggest, most reputable, fanciest hotels in the world sometimes only have an 8-foot floor-to-floor height, but now that's a concrete and steel building. It's just a different structure, and different costs apply. And I would expect that this more formulaic building is based on more traditional Type 5 metal or wood construction, so it just kind of fits. It's their model. And to go, okay, well, let's have a 12-foot floor and a 10-foot floor and another 10-foot floor, and then maybe an 8 and an 8. It kind of mixes the types of construction that you would use to get there. So I'm sure that I might be close. I'm not positive, of course, because we haven't seen improvement plans, but there's probably some of the recipe is what they normally build and the costs associated with that, rather than, oh gosh, we've got to change everything to meet this requirement. And once we close the public hearing, I got some other comments too. Thank you.
Right, I'll hold my comments on that topic until I don't have any questions for the applicant. John, do you have any questions?
I have a question about the whole spirit of thinking green, and we talked about that in 7.2 with the parking stalls, and then the topic of the electric charging station was brought up. And since we don't know what brand will be coming in, maybe this is a moot point, but is there any provision in either the parking lot or the structure itself for solar array panels, and would that have any effect on the elevation of the structure itself, or do you know?
Currently, there's no plan for solar panels that I know of. As far as, is that was your question in the parking lot, or?
Well, yeah, when it just kind of jumped into my mind about when we were talking about the parking lot, and then when we were looking at the roof structure and looking at the height versus the other structure, parapets, et cetera. I was just curious as if there was a provision or an allowance made for either in the parking lot, which is, a separate issue, or the structure itself for solar array panels, and would that have any bearing on the overall height?
Yeah, and to my knowledge at this point, I don't believe solar panels are being looked at for this project. But, going back to the prior question, as far as a compelling reason to to approve this variance. When I spoke with the architect about it, because this is more in his arena than mine, so to speak, he felt very strongly about the height and the varying roof line that they put forward for this project. I think there's several other projects. I think I'm not sure if it's this exact same line, but I know there's a Folsom one he referenced, and other ones that went with a more flat roof line, and they were able to bring the height down. But he felt very strongly that the height and varied roof height that he proposed with this project was an improvement. And yes, while it does exceed the current standard height, he felt that it was an exceedance that was worthwhile.
So I need to go back, because I don't have them here. The elevations that we approved back in either 2008, 2009, or 2010, were they these elevations here? Did it look like this?
Yes.
It looked like this?
Yes.
These are the elevations that we approved.
They're
Right. You
if
saw
I
them today.
believe,
Okay.
I believe they're the exact same ones.
So these exact same elevations. And I will concur with the architect in that I think the variation in the elevations are quite attractive, okay? If this, but again, this request has nothing at all to do with the site, okay? If this was built on a perfectly flat piece of ground somewhere, you'd still be here asking for the variance. For whatever reason, the architect has designed the height of this building to be the height of this building. This kind of gets back to my question as to which I asked of staff early on. I'm trying to ferret out why it has to be this height. And several reasons were offered. One had to do with, I think, prototype was the term. The other one dealt with the electromechanical engineering enclosures to kind of help shield them. And it seemed like there was a third one, which I don't recall. And I'd kind of like to know what the compelling reason is, because back to my earlier question, compelling reason. And, you know, if it's for electromechanical, I kind of overheard the suggestion of the solar panels, and I would submit, staff would have to comment on this. If you had a solar array up there, if those would be considered differently, and I would hope they would, than our typical electromechanical equipment, which I believe we require shielding on. I don't know if they heard that, but, and so if you put solar arrays up there, then we have to worry about the shielding of the electromechanical equipment. So I'd like to give the variance. It's only 5%, but again, for me to get to that point, there really needs to be a compelling reason for precedent. I've always operate on the principle of precedent. If I'm going to give you a variance, the next person's going to come by, there's got to be a basis for that variance. And so it's really hard for me not knowing what the real reason is, architectural preference. And I realize that you unfortunately are the messenger, and I'm trying not to shoot you. The architect really should be here to argue their case, frankly, if the architect felt that strongly, because these are questions about, okay, well, why does it have to be this size? And yes, I'm going to hold you to these elevations, this design structure, these features. I'm not going to allow you to go to a flat roof. But I'm not seeing the reason to go to permit the variance. And I don't have a good sense for how that's going to sit on the property. And I think we're short a little bit on some of the renditions that I think for a project of not of this magnitude necessarily, but of this significance in terms of its location, as we've talked about tonight throughout the evening, having a little bit more help with that would have helped. So I don't know if staff heard my question regarding the solar consideration, and whether solar if they had solar panels on the roof, for example, would we treat that differently than other electromechanical equipment on the roof, which I think we require shielding. And frankly, in this day and age, I would hope that we would. An air conditioner is a lot different than in appearance than the solar array. Solar arrays are almost icons of our age, and I know you won't take credit for that phrase, but I know you said it years ago, Mr. Rivas. But solar panels are now kind of icons of our age, you know, and that's great. So I'm long-winded about not seeing the compelling reason for the variance, and I'm sorry. Oh,
You asked me to raise
here
my
comes a
hand when I
compelling
had the
reason.
compelling reason. I think one part of your statement I just wanted to, you mentioned, you know, if this is built out in a field, would it be the same roof line and same I think it's very important to realize that this isn't being built out in a field, and it is being built probably more than 10 feet below Highway 50. I think that might be the best case. 30 feet below Forney Road, probably the best case. It does suffer from being much lower than the surrounding roadways. And I think when you ask about, you know, not wanting to treat this as a special case, I think that needs to be taken into consideration. We're asking for a couple foot variance on a project that sits that far below its adjacent surroundings. I think that's a lot different than a project that sits 10 feet above a roadway. And so I would hope that the site conditions are taken into account, because I do believe, in talking with the architect, that was thought about when they were making this design, because I mean it does need to be seen from the adjacent roadways, and I think that it's important to also note that the photo sims that were looked at and the aesthetic features that were approved and as you mentioned, people, you know, supported at the time. I believe a lot of that was due to the, you know, varied roof line and the building height and design that was set forth at the time. So hopefully I've explained myself well enough. Like I said, I'm not an expert in why we did it, but I'm just trying to convey that I do believe that a lot of thought was put into it, and I do believe we have a fairly good reason for it.
I'm persuaded that if we think about it, there might be a compelling reason here. I'm not an architect, and I want to go on the record as how grateful I am to have somebody with an architect's vocabulary with us now. But, you know, I do recall when you could buy home plans out of the Sears Roebuck catalog. And when you got the plans, you weren't instructed to change room sizes or roof pitch or anything. My grandfather used to design swimming pool sections so that he could put his civil engineer stamp on them and sell those drawings so that people could build swimming pools in LA County. And so what I'm persuaded is that I think to achieve economies of scale and to avoid paying architects any more than they absolutely have to, hotel chains, retail chains arrive at a set of plans that already have the calculations built in. So if you propose to do something that changes the plans for whatever innocent reason or whatever aesthetic reason, you find that all of your calculations for this structure have been tossed into a cocked hat. So it may represent the developer's preference to use some standard set of plans, and that's what they've arrived at. So I'd be interested in my architect's colleagues' take on that.
Chair
Yeah,
Lowry,
yeah.
if staff could just, you know, maybe assist with a few comments. The first comment I want to make, and it's not one where you would use it as a finding, but I do want to point out in my professional experience, I've worked for other jurisdictions besides the city of Placerville, and 40 feet as the maximum height in a commercial zone is on the short side, typically looking at 50 feet or more. A second comment I'd like to make is, and I think the applicant did point that out, and I would refer you to staff's proposed findings of fact, D as in dog. And I think if you read that, it's really referring to the topography of the site, that it is somewhat unique, and staff would agree with the applicant that this site does sort of sit in a hole. And I think it's very, very important then for a hotel, which is a use allowed by right. So the use is allowed by right, it's not discretionary, it's the site plan review that was discretionary that designed the project. But I think because it sits in a hole, I think that, you know, in staff's opinion, that would suffice as some sufficient justification for a 5% increase in the height. And so what I would recommend, if you're so inclined, you could modify or embellish on findings of fact D to maybe articulate that a little bit better. If you find that that's a justification because of the height variance from Highway 50, Forney Road in the back, and then the overall pad of that site sitting much lower than the surrounding main
Okay,
roadway.
I'm sorry. Were you finished? I apologize.
One other quick comment. I know there was a comment about the structure of the building being wood or what have you. It's my understanding under the building code, because this is a 4-story building, then it can't be all wood. I think it would have to be steel and concrete on that first floor.
Yeah. I apologize for the interruption. So you all are going to get one more shot at the applicant, and then we're going to move into public comment. So please
So
go ahead.
I just want to respond to Commissioner, or to Director Rivas's comment, though. And I guess you're right, Pierre. I think an argument could be made, given how the hotel is sitting, and the visual. And the visual is incredibly important. So it's been kind of about that since I started this evening. And I guess my frustration with this is, I would think that we would have had some modeling that would show, okay, if you don't give us the variance, it's going to look like this. And with the variance, it's likely going to look like this. I have nothing to compare it to. The statement that if we don't allow the additional 7 feet because of it's sitting below Highway 50, there's a likelihood that you're going to have unsightly views. I can understand that, but it would have been nice to have had some data. This is kind of frustrating me, like the pumping station did. I really didn't think there was a lot of information there, visual information, for me to make a finding that, yep, that's all harmonious. I really wasn't comfortable with that, frankly. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. And again, I don't take the variance is small, it's 5%, but I just don't take those lightly. You know, I think it's important when we go ahead and make a variance. So
Point well taken, Commissioner Friend. I just will add, when staff did view the site, and I would agree, maybe there could have been some elevation showing a difference, but in staff's opinion, because of the topography that would be then behind the hotel, there wasn't really anything there that would be impacted by an additional 2 feet. As opposed to, say, I can recall a previous project that I worked on in the Myers area, and there they were looking at the different heights of different zones in the Myers plan that was being developed for that area, and it was very, very important to consider the height there because you would significantly impact a lot of very important view sheds, where here, you know, that really isn't the case.
Okay, any more questions for the applicant from members? Thank you for your time. I'd like to invite
Thank
any
you.
members of the public who care to comment on this.
Well, watching, it's hard not to comment, but I'm inclined, though it pains me to say, to agree with Mr. Fisher's comment that adding the extra percentage, the extra top space, can add to the aesthetics. But that's an opinion based not on what he said, but my conjecture, my assumption. Because I know of projects where you do have air conditioning on the top and things of that kind that would be exposed. But I wouldn't be able to make a decision. I'm lucky because I don't have to. But I don't see any differential about what the difference would be. I'm just assuming that what he said is correct. Your other option is you approve the building for 1 story less. Problem with that, of course, is it adds to the construction costs later on. The difficulty that I fundamentally have is that this is going to be a major gateway to Placerville. It would be the way people perceive this town as they come in on Highway 50. 5 feet, this or that. I have no way to know what the project's going to look like because I don't have the experience of being able to go back at what it was in 2010 or something. So sometimes you just have to give an architect, if you're going to do it, you have to give them some discretion so that when it's finally through, we can blame them if it doesn't work and we can credit them if it does. But in the meantime, wouldn't it be nice if we had some facts to go on instead of just conjecture, just assumptions about what would be hidden and what it would look like without that extra 5 feet or so? That's all.
Thank you. I'd like to close the public hearing at this time and discuss among the members.
I might be carving out a minority opinion here, but a couple of things on the height of the building. Just call it height X right now, rather than what they've applied for. Most of us think about the height of a building based on kind of pedestrian scale, and you know, if a building is 40 or 50 feet tall and you're standing right next to it 6 feet away in an urban environment, no matter how tall that building is or how tall the building isn't, it's going to feel like Manhattan if it's a really tall building. In this particular case, based on my experience, this building, I think, is going to be, this structure, this whole project is going to be viewed at freeway scale, which allows a whole lot more latitude for it can be bigger, it can be longer, it can be wider, and whatever, in terms of your perception of it. And over 2 to 5 feet, whatever it is, I mean, most of us are probably not even going to be able to discern that difference. We can look at the two-dimensional abstractions that are try to be 3D drawings and that sort of thing nowadays with computer-generated graphics. But in the real world, zooming along eastbound on Highway 50 as you enter the area, I would think that most people aren't going to be able to tell the difference. Recognizing the, they would not be able to perceive the difference in the height if you kind of shaved it down a little bit. I do agree with Commissioner Friend. It is a little awkward to not have better graphics to look at, but this is what we've got. And from a practical standpoint, I think aesthetically and visually, the height doesn't bother me. The notion of giving a variance does require a great deal of concern, but I think this is precisely one of those situations where, it's not a hill to die on, no pun intended. We can, I would feel comfortable supporting the variance, recognizing that, the way people perceive it is not going to be so much how we discuss it and describe it. Given the unique characteristics of the site, it is down in the hole. I think this is it's just reasonable. I also think it's defendable from an aesthetic and even a regulatory standpoint, because it's not like the next 6 hotels on Weber Creek are now all going to ask us to have a variance as well, because that's not going to probably happen. It's sound urban design to put a hotel there. It's a difficult site. On the architect's licensing exam, they give you a question, where does the hotel go? And that's where you would hopefully, to pass the exam, say that's where it goes. So that's it's a great site for that. So even though it's kind of scary, the V word variance, I think in this case it's not going to do any harm, and I think to have that extra couple of feet, and I think it'll, on the other hand, it's not our job as a commission to be involved in economic development, but the reality of the matter is, the community needs and deserves a project like this. So I think our discussion is kind of around the edges in terms of approving this. So I can support it. Thank you.
Over the last few years, I had an opportunity to travel a little bit, and if we go up here to Colfax, we can fly by on the freeway, and look at a hotel sign and the building's down below the freeway. And you go over to North Bay and you find the same thing. I had to stay in that hotel, and the freeway is up above you. And the question was brought up, well, you knock a level off of this hotel, what happens? We drive by and we look at the roof. I don't think that's anything we want to see. When we first had this, I was driving east on 50, and I told my wife, I said, they're proposing a hotel right there, and she goes, down there in the hole? And if you look at it, and I was sitting here running calculation that from Forney Road to the bottom of their property, it drops 136 feet. And we're going to take a building that is however long and set that somewhere along that slope. 2 feet isn't going to make any difference. I'm in support of the variance.
I'll say first off that I'm also in support of the variance, but I'm with Commissioner Friend in that I would have liked to have heard, well, the reason that we need that extra 2 feet is I look at the height of the first floor versus the second, third is because we have meeting rooms, we have a certain type of foyer that would be facilitated by that extra 2 feet. We found that meeting rooms, traffic, whatever sort of facilities work better when we have that additional height on that ground floor. Having to arrange training, meeting rooms, it's always nice to walk into a facility where you do not have an 8-foot ceiling and you know you're going to be there for a day and a half with 35 plumbers and well drillers. You want to get some space. So having said that, I would have liked to have seen, and I know we don't have a brand, if this is a certain type or I don't know, whatever layout of hotel. Maybe it's the foyer itself where it's an aesthetic, maybe it's meeting rooms. I would have liked to have seen that, but again, given that 2-foot variation, and hopefully that will serve a purpose to hopefully, I don't want to say disguise, I don't know what the correct term is, but to mitigate the sight of that roof and let it blend into the surroundings. I would be in support of that variation.
And I'll just close by saying that the elevation as it currently exists, for me it rhymes with the downtown Main Street architecture, the varying heights, the buildings, different fascia treatments. I mean, I think if it was a monolith, it'd be a non-starter. So I think my point is that it seems to me that a good deal of careful thought and consideration went through the 2010 iteration of this process. So I'm pretty satisfied that there was due diligence and men and women of goodwill involved. So that
Well, I was just going to make the observation that a compelling reason could be made to increasing the height by 10 feet, because then it might make the in and out sign look even less conspicuous. And that's probably the argument that I would have used. Throw some palm trees in there, yes, the palm trees. Yeah, I respect all my fellow commissioners, and there's just not, I guess, when it comes down to it for me, there just was not a good presentation in terms of what we were presenting. Now, these go back to 2010, but, you know, for example, this one, I know the viewing audience can't see it, but this doesn't look like we're in a hole. I mean, if we wanted to sell the argument, this just really isn't getting us to that. So, yeah, I'm happy however folks decide to go on this. I think it's a good project. I don't think not granting the variance is a deal breaker on this. I think that's the other thing that's important to consider. So, anyway.
And with that, I'm prepared to move to findings of fact, the conclusions and recommendations on page 3 and 4, specifically Roman numeral 1, A through F, Roman numeral 2, 1 through 4. And so that's my motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
So now we can discuss my motion.
It is just conjecture, but I would, think that, architects always get accused of just doing pretty pictures, but, more often than not, there's also some thought and some engineering going on. And I would suspect, and that's, I emphasize that word, that a big part of the architect's insistence on the and defense of the height of the overall height of the structure is not just aesthetic for the exterior and have it relate properly in heights and widths to the towers and the main part of the structure, but the very real requirement of the floor-to-floor height that you need for mechanical equipment for all your ductwork and distribution. They have a 12-foot floor-to-floor height for the first floor. It's probably 10 feet clear inside to allow room for that mechanical equipment, electrical and communications work. And then they have a 10-foot floor-to-floor height for the other floors. And so there's probably 8-foot clear ceilings so that you have 2 feet thereabouts for the depth of your structure, whatever, whether it's steel or trusses or wood or whatever. So it's not just the architect wanted to do a pretty picture, although that's part of it too. And then for the record, when I used to work for these guys, they did better presentations. Thank you.
Okay. Wow. Are there any other comments or discussions on the motion? Great. I'd like to ask for a roll call vote on this.
Chair Lowry.
Aye.
Member Wolf.
Aye.
Member List.
Aye.
Member Roby.
Aye.
Member Friend.
No.
Okay, well, motion carries, and my copy of the agenda says that before we move into Section 8, that we're all going to stand up and stretch and take care of things as we deem. And since we're out of session, thanks for coming in and commenting, Kurt. Appreciate it. I use the treadmill at the gym, and because I hold onto the bars, I can take long strides. But when I do like real walking, my quads just complain like I'll get out.
I haven't heard from her for a long time. The last time I did, it was she was trying to get severe for some.
Fortunately for me, I've worked for the state and the telephone company long enough that buying an automobile is very easy for me. Unless it's painted primer purple, I really don't care.
My wife always asks Yes, we weren't in the room.
You can't, that's part of our, that's part of our, that's part of our ethical training. That's part of our ethical training. Exactly. Part of the, I'm really surprised, well, I'm gonna tell you.
I don't know if we're at this part where we say,
But
this
going
is
to.
really.
I'm gonna restrain. In the last, in the last 2 weeks, I've
Oh,
gone
okay.
on
Yeah,
Fridays.
I'm the same way.
And neither time have I ever heard them on Friday or even sooner. Well, last night we're at dinner, and the wife goes, "Oh, this thing about the bad tech." Oh, I see Mike. Oh, he's. And I went, "What? What are you talking?" I don't believe it. Hey, congratulations and welcome.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry to get a chance to say hi earlier.
Isn't it frustrating though when you want to talk about something, but you can't? Because like that horse already left, or it's not under the charter of the planning commission.
Yeah, you know, I was talking to a couple people about that. It's like, what can we and can't we talk about, and then what should we, because it's in the future, and what is just like, don't worry about it because that's already been done. So don't
Well, it's
worry
that
about
whole
this.
thing about we have to deal with the way things are, not the way they should be or could be. Because somebody else's
We have an
job
open
is to
microphone?
change.
Yes.
Right there.
Welcome back, everyone. We're back in session. Okay, now we're at item 8.1. Separate nominations are requested for the Planning Commission officers' positions of chair and vice chair. Officer terms are retroactive from March 1st, 2015. Step into the time tunnel with me. And will serve to February 28th, 2016. Newly elected officers shall take office at the Commission's next meeting. Per Article of 7G George of the Commission bylaws, there must be 5 members present at the meeting to elect officers. Otherwise, the matter will be continued. So we are cleared in hot, and I guess we start entertaining nominations for our new chair.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to enter into nomination Commissioner List as chair and Commissioner Wolf as vice chair, please. And then I'd like to move that nominations be closed.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Well, now we can discuss it, and this is, at this point, John begs for mercy and will be ignored.
Yeah. I would prefer not to serve as chair.
You don't want to?
You know, Commissioner Wolf has a lot of experience. If I thought about this through, I probably could have nominated you as chair. Would you be interested in serving as chair and tutoring the Commissioner List and the fine art of chairmanship?
How can I say no? Yeah, I would do it. It'll be kind of entertaining. We'll have a good time.
So I'll revise my nominations for Commissioner Wolf for chair and Commissioner List for vice chair. Commissioner List, would you be comfortable assuming the vice chair role, sir?
I can swallow hard and do that.
Okay. All right, so that's your motion,
That's my motion.
okay? Can we second it?
I guess I'll revise my second, or somebody can second the second.
I'll second the second. Okay, any discussion?
Point of reference, this is a one-year term, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's what we tell you first.
Well, I mean, 4 years.
First one who's ever asked that. He's thinking.
Okay, so all in favor of the motion as it stands, so signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. That's disposed of. So, item 8.2, I'm going to ask my colleague's opinion, but my suggestion is that I would prefer that we do this bylaw review at some future meeting, maybe even a night when we might otherwise be dark for lack of activity. I think the bylaw review requires greater powers of cogitation than I'm prepared to bring at this time of the night. So I think to give it the respect it's entitled to, I'd like to propose that we reschedule the bylaws review either to, I think it would be very difficult if we had a full agenda or any sort of controversial items on the agenda to do it. So if we can find a day when, a scheduled time when we might otherwise be dark in the near future. I think the other compelling reason is that it would be a good opportunity for our newest members to get a feel for the data, the back and forth, and the mechanics of this thing. And I mean, I'm not suggesting that it needs any wholesale changes. It just maybe needs some wordsmithing. Speaking for myself, having used it as a script to go through these, because when I'm looking at the agenda item, I'm looking right here at the bylaws to see what it is I'm supposed to do next. So it may be helpful to clarify some of those steps.
Point of clarification, with my tongue in cheek, are we as staff to, if this request were to go forward where we look for an agenda that is not packed with, for instance, perhaps animal rendering plants or something related to bioterrorism or something like that, where where you would have the time to, to really discuss these in greater detail. Is that is kind of what I'm hearing?
Right, right. No, I understand staff's enthusiasm for taking another additional night away from home to deal with, you know, to deal with it in that fashion. But, yeah, so at any rate, so that's my proposal. I would like to move that we obey the bylaw review until such time in the near future that we have either a light agenda or no agenda items on a particular scheduled planning commission meeting day.
So I'm going to second that for sake of
Could it be
discussion.
more simply stated that it is, they're tabling this item?
Yeah,
for-
so first of all, I concur with Chairman Lowry's suggestion to table, and for the reasons, particularly give the newer members an opportunity to review. Question for staff: there's no ordinance or other requirement that they have to be done by a date certain, right? Not like the second meeting of June or something
No.
each year.
No.
All right, so
In fact, my history here at the city, it was from 2001 to probably 2008. They were not even brought up at all. And when I became the city planner, I looked at the bylaws, and I think there was a discussion about the order of business, and that's what kind of started the process.
Yeah.
Back in probably the Ogden era,
Yeah.
and we got to this point. And no, there's nothing in the bylaws that says we need to bring back this yearly. I just think it may be wise to do so because of
plus I'd been
circumstance.
chairman, I think, for 3 years,
I
and
think you
somebody
did.
finally said, you know. But I'm not. I wouldn't necessarily be a fan of having these as the only agenda item. I'm going to say that. So what I would offer as an alternative, it is we can simply keep these on the agenda, and if we don't want to take it up for whatever reason, we can move it to the following meeting until such a time, because of the meeting load, or we're able to dispense with a very easy item in under 30 minutes, which hasn't happened yet, but we might be able to do it. Then we could simply take it up, and so it would always be on it. That's how I would actually.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the voice of experience speaking. So
We could also break it up into sections if okay.
you
That
have
got
something
shot down
to do?
really quick.
I just wanted to add that I agree with Commissioner Friend. We can just put it on the agenda and we'll eventually get to it. But I think it is also important and significant to, even if they're helpless victims, we need to have other members of the public here when we're deliberating this kind of stuff. So city activities aren't such a mystery to everyone.
Oh, you want to invite him to the sausage factory?
Chair Lowry, if I could make a comment, basically from staff's perspective, at least would be my preference that we would place that on agendas that are light so that you can discuss it as opposed to just putting it on every agenda, because then we're essentially telling the community that this item is going to be discussed.
That's the voice of even more experience.
Yeah, right. Okay, so what do I need to do to euthanize my motion? I'd like to withdraw my motion. Thank you. Before I go back onto the motion thing, I suspect pro forma I need to table item 8.2 with concurrence.
No, actually, I think what we're going to do is we're going to defer this item to staff to a meeting of an appropriate workload. Is that actually where you were going with that, Pierre?
Yes, I would just move then that the item be continued off calendar, staff
There we
to
go.
put it back on the agenda at a time where there's a lighter agenda.
Great. That's the motion you
Like
want.
that, okay,
General consent would be fine
Yeah.
as far as.
okay, so,
All in favor? Do we need a motion, actual
Oh,
motion? or-
general consent is.
Yeah,
is
so all in
Okay.
favor of the staff's
Aye.
suggestion how to approach? Yeah.
Aye.
Yeah. Assuming there's no opposition.
okay. Okay, so that brings us to number 9.
We have
What's your story?
compassion.
Matters from commissioner and staff.
I believe the first item on there is the Main Street Rehabilitation Construction Activity Status. And we're very fortunate to have our city engineer, Rebecca Neves, here on staff. So I will turn that status report over to her.
Good evening. Just wanted to give you guys a little bit of an update on the Main Street project. Construction work for the Phase 1A waterline replacement project has concluded. Vince Aguirre Construction finished approximately a week early, and we're currently in the process of closing out the contract with them. In addition to that, the subsequent phases are Phase 1B, which is the sewer line rehabilitation, which was minimally invasive, very minor digging. It's essentially sewer lining on the existing sewer main located in Main Street. I'm going to be in receipt of the 100% plans tomorrow. I wouldn't be surprised if that's why Mr. Fisher scurried out the door, because he owes me some plans. And we anticipate on soliciting informal bidding of that portion of the work within a week or so, and having it out to bid for 2 weeks per the public contract code. Work that's under the threshold value of $175,000 can be solicited for informal bidding as opposed to public bidding. So we're going to utilize that since the rehabilitation work, doing the lining work, is kind of a specialty. You know, if you hire a general, if you hire a Veer Camp, typically they will sub it out. You get better pricing if you just go directly to the specialty contractors. Is the reason why we were doing this. Try to find a little bit more cost-efficient way for the city in our budget. The next phase after that, and the last phase on the project currently planned, is Phase 2, which includes the grind and the overlay rehabilitation, pavement rehabilitation of Main Street. You can see there's a couple exhibits placed throughout the room. It includes some pedestrian safety features and ADA compliant features such as new ADA ramps and bulb outs. We have council on the last meeting on the 12th of this month did approve various aesthetic features. Currently there is not sufficient budget to implement them all for sure in the base project. The base project does have available funding, so what we have explored the option of doing was creating bid alternates. One that addresses landscaping, another one that addresses some electrical improvements, and some various concrete flat work items as well, including the use of stamped and stained concrete within the crosswalks and at the bulb outs. Those items will be included in the bid package for Phase 2 as bid alternates. If the bids should come in low enough, we'll be able to implement those items and select them as budget allows. But they are also easy enough to be deferred and phased in at a later date when more money becomes available. Let's see what else. And that covers the bulk of it. If you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you for your report, and thank you also for being here. That you were very helpful tonight.
Certainly, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I think the second item is in regards to a letter that the city has received from the California Department of Housing and Community Development regarding the city's fifth cycle housing element compliance status. And that letter is dated March 19th of 2015. And essentially, HCD is finding now that we are no longer in compliance. And that is essentially due to the fact that the city was not able to meet its Cycle 4 housing element requirements as far as our RENA numbers. So the RENA numbers being the city was essentially mandated to rezone enough properties sufficient at a 20 units per acre density. And I recall there are a couple of the commissioners present that deliberated on our Cycle 5 element. So we were looking at rezoning sufficient properties for Cycle 4, which is 106 units, and Cycle 5, that's the current element that takes us through 2021, at 133 units for a total of 239 units. We had until October 31st of 2014 was our due date to complete the rezones for Cycle 4. We didn't meet that. And you're probably aware, too, of when the housing element was adopted, it had 10 proposed sites that staff evaluated and determined as being suitable for potentially being rezoned to a R5 single-family or multifamily residential zone district. And under state law, we were required to maintain a minimum density of 20 units per acre. And what happened when that one went before the Planning Commission, the Planning Commission did not feel that that was an appropriate density for the city of Placerville. And so the compromise was that zone district would have a cap at 20 units per acre minimum and 20 units per acre maximum. Though the state didn't find that we were on its face deficient in that category, they did feel that that particular restriction was rather restrictive. And so giving you a heads up that staff will be coming back to the commission again with proposed recommended changes to the R5 zone. We're looking at a more flexible range of possibly 20 to 24 units per acre. And we'll be looking at also a general plan amendment that will allow for the high density residential land use designation to allow for a higher 24 units per acre minimum as well. So that'll be coming before you. We're going to try and come into compliance, hopefully sometime as quickly as we can. We'll also be coming before you with some recommendations on what properties we're going to rezone. And so, you know, we're involved in that evaluation as we speak. I believe you were provided copies of this letter. We're in consultation with HCD staff, and they're more than happy to try and help us come into compliance. But again, it's one of those things where, as was pointed out in the past, a one-size-fits-all sometimes doesn't really fit some of the smaller jurisdictions, especially when the market isn't dictating 20 units per acre or greater. So we're trying to look at different avenues of accomplishing that, either an overlay zone, or do we just stick with our base zone district with the 20 units per acre minimum. But we'll be sharing with you, hopefully in the near future, some different alternatives that we have. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Yeah.
Are there development projects kind of hovering in the pattern with respect to the parcels being considered here? I mean, are there some developers stacked up out there that are looking for these rezones to take place? Or is it's still pretty much just a regulatory kind of activity that we're going through?
I believe the only parcel out of the 10, and Mr. Painter can chime in if I misspeak, but from what I recall, one of the 10 is a 4-acre or so parcel on Mallard Lane. It was part of the Ridge at Orchard Hill project. And so that had an approved project on it. So we would be essentially upzoning that particular piece in that development. But the others, I don't think have any active development proposal on them.
Is that the site adjacent to the veterinarian's office there?
No, that's on Green Valley Road. So instead of, looking to left there if you drive just past Mallard, the intersection on the left side, and that is a proposed site. That property's for sale. And that property, many years ago, did have a multifamily, I think it was like a senior, restricted housing complex that was approved on it. And then subsequently to that project died for lack of being implemented by the owners. The city then rezoned it to commercial. And so staff has reevaluated that site as being a potentially appropriate site for an apartment complex. So we're working our way through the process to potentially rezoning that back to commercial. There will also be a general plan amendment from commercial back to multifamily as well.
Just for fun, what's the consequence of noncompliance?
The consequence of noncompliance would be the inability to seek certain funding through the state.
Are we seeking that now, or is that possible potential future funding?
Well, we're currently implementing our, it's a community development block grant of $250,000 that's administered through the state. had we been in non-compliant when we made an application for those fundings, we would not have been able to seek those fundings. So it can be detrimental in terms of being able to take advantage of certain grant programs if we don't have a certified compliant housing element.
So it can be detrimental to the budget on the one hand, and then detrimental to the design and flavor of the city on the other hand, being forced to, follow certain one-size-fits-all approaches. So
There's additional outcome, if I can interject. Under the law that required us to provide a minimum of 20 dwelling units per acre, because the city did not go through with that rezone, a developer could, because those sites are listed in the housing element, they could come to the city tomorrow and want to develop on that site at the density of 20 dwelling units per acre. And the city really wouldn't have much to, I don't think we could oppose it, perhaps on environmental grounds, but that would be, I don't want to speak too much, but that is another issue. So yes, we're going to need to go through our due diligence to get these properties properly zoned to meet our demand and needs from the state.
Yeah, I would concur with Mr. Painter that that's my understanding as well, that a low-income housing developer could come in and then impose, but I believe that would have to be a low-income housing project as opposed to a market project at 20 units per acre. But I think that's not very likely, so I think time, fortunately, is on our side. I think it's been probably 20 years now since the last apartment complex of any reasonable density approaching that, and I think that's the senior housing complex on Clay Street, and I believe that's less than 20 units per acre. But that we haven't seen an apartment complex in Placerville now in about 20 years. So there isn't really a market for it. And so because of that, we're also concerned about property owners making a claim of inverse condemnation. We don't know how far that would go, but there is that concern. And so we're looking at different possibilities, maybe an overlay district where a property owner could then do a development based on the base zoning, and then they could also do the overlay. The issue with that is then should a particular piece of property with the overlay be developed as something other than a 20 units per acre product, then the city would then be obligated to replace that lost acreage by rezoning something else.
So I think that the case going forward, based on the last time we went through this, is, somehow we need to communicate to people that, our options are, this is the amount of money and opportunity cost. We aren't going to be fed by that fire hose anymore, or garden hose, based on what the figures really are. And so, that being the case, are we prepared to be Carmel? Say. And that's the decision that the people that like to rant and rave about this stuff need to make.
I wanted to ask a question about the change in the Historical Advisory Committee and the resolution of the council executed to shift responsibilities back to Planning Commission. And I guess my question is it staff's expectation then that the commission will take up those responsibilities at our regular meetings, or are we going to have meetings to deal with historical issues as a separate agenda item, or are those only going to come up when there's a specific item that we're reviewing? I'm trying to understand how that's going to work. Or have you not thought that through yet, which is fine too?
From a practical example, if a development project that is within a historic district or involves a property that's on the city's historic resource inventory or on the state or national register, then instead of a project that would have gone to the Historical Advisory Committee for their review and comment and recommendation, of course, that would no longer be happening. You would serve in that role. You would be making the decision. You wouldn't have necessarily a recommendation except from staff and the advocates and applicant, of course, who would obviously be representing their project. From that context, that's how that would happen, or the procedure. In terms of the other duties assigned to them, if that's kind of the second part of your question, maintenance of the historic resource inventory is one example of their duty. Helping council with suggestions on funding mechanisms and other things. As time goes by, when staff is apprised of those types of things, we will bring those to your attention where we feel that maybe it's best to have a public forum where discussion and your review and recommendation to council to move forward, maybe it will reach a level where the importance will make it a happen circumstance. So
I'm going to I'm going to throw out just an idea. We
think
don't
I'm
have to
answering your-
discuss it tonight, but I mean, and maybe staff can go back and consider this. I'm wondering if when we have projects that would otherwise have gone to the Historical Advisory Committee for review and formulation of a recommendation, if we shouldn't then bifurcate that component out of a particular agenda item, and then this body kind of sit as the Historical Advisory Committee. We won't be that, obviously, but our agenda be structured, maybe the agenda items be structured that we first consider that component and deal with it before we deal with the rest. I'm just thinking about if you can it's kind of abstract, but just perhaps I'm just going to say give some thought to how maybe we should approach this differently than perhaps we have in the past, Pierre, when the Historical Advisory Committee was not active, and how we did it, and how maybe we should do it moving forward given this change. I'm just thinking it out loud.
I guess staff's only comment to that would be, in addition to the city's staffing ability and budgetary constraints to maintain yet another committee, I think was one of the reasons why the city council then decided to disband the Historic Advisory Committee, because as you're well aware, Commissioner Friend, that those duties did rest with the Planning Commission. They were advisory to the commission. So even when the item came before you, that was the extra piece that you had when considering a project that involved historic resources, was a recommendation from the Historic Advisory Committee. Now you will be relying solely on the staff to do that analysis instead of the Historic Advisory Committee.
So, right, so I guess, well, let me ask this question. Do you, and I hate to belabor this, but it's going to impact us, trust me, Mr. Chairman.
No, I know.
Is it so in the past, staff was doing staff work for the Historical Advisory Committee?
Yes.
Correct.
Is that staff work still going to get done, or for items? I guess I'm trying to understand what it's going to look like when there are issues relevant to a historical consideration, what we're going to get. And I guess I'm also suggesting that our agenda items be structured so we might deal with that component first and separate, and then make a recommendation to ourselves. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but ultimately we would kind of be doing that, as opposed to having it all mushed up in the same salad kind of thing. I don't know, I'm just a thought.
It's the historic impact of any project is, as Mr. Andrew pointed out, whether it's on our historic inventory or whether the property resides in one of our historic districts, then that's just another parameter, be it an environmental parameter such as the biological impacts, or on zoning or trees or what have you. It's just one other parameter. It's one other environmental factor that we consider when we do the environmental evaluation of the project as well. And so it probably leans a little bit more heavily onto the architectural side of it, and that's where we were hoping to get a more focused level of expertise and a body that would focus on the historical character as opposed to just generally the aesthetics of a project and architectural features. So I don't think it's really any additional work. I think you would carry on the same way you do on a project by project basis. The difference where I see there may be the lack of a benefit of having another body would be, say, for example, as we move forward with the proposed downtown Main Street commercial historic district. So they did make a recommendation on the boundaries of that. Staff will eventually bring that forward to you to consider. And so you do have that level of recommendation from the Historic Advisory Committee. What you won't have from them is the accompanying design guidelines that you probably remember we've been slowly working our way through. We're going to also revisit the historic sections of our historic guidelines to better direct both the public, the property owner, staff, the commission on how to approach a review of projects that fall within one of our historic districts.
That's a good segue to the next point of discussion tonight. I know Director Rivas emailed, I think most of you, perhaps with the exception of Member Roby, regarding a preservation training workshop which will be held in this building on Thursday, June the 4th. It's an all-day event. The city is hosting this. It's from the Office of Historic Preservation. So it's a great segue from what Director Rivas was just talking about. The focus really is primarily driven towards the economic development side of historic preservation. And we are excited to have some speakers come up and discuss various issues. I wanted to certainly encourage you all. I know I've spoken to at least one member up there who's decided that they're going to go. I know some members of City Council are going to do as well. It's been open really to planners, decision makers, elected folks, not only into this community, but the foothills, Sacramento area. So we're going to have perhaps quite a few folks here from different jurisdictions with some different background and different perspectives that perhaps this body and our electeds had not perhaps considered, especially as we are now considering a downtown district. So staff wanted to bring OHP up here. They were willing to do that. We're really excited to have them here. I hope all of you, if you can't attend all of it, hopefully you can come in for a session or two. That would be very, very good. Good educational, and it's free. So it starts at 8:30 is kind of the meet and greet, and sessions begin at 9. They'll go to about 11:30, then they break for lunch and come back in at 1 or 1:30 and go to 3:30 or 4. And the folks who at the Historical Society down the street here on Main Street, they have agreed to perform in costume a tour of downtown. So I know some of you have already gone through that. If others haven't, I highly suggest that it's a great way to learn a little bit more about your town, especially downtown. The characters involved it's well worth it. So that'll happen after the event. If you want to participate, you certainly can. And for Member Roby, we have some information for you.
Is there any other business before the council this evening?
Well, I could go into what likely could be coming down the road here. At this particular moment, I don't think we're going to have a meeting on the 2nd unless something were to happen, let's say tomorrow, that we can get on the agenda because we're running. But I can tell you what in the pipeline are the items that Director Rivas mentioned. I don't really have a daylight as to when that's going to happen, but it's coming soon. Those will be items. We're probably not going to have the bylaws on at the same time. I guess that would be one of those. We have 2 cell tower projects that are coming before you soon. both of them, one particular provider. We've got just submitted, or will be submitted this week, is a eating and drinking establishment, the Outbreak Brewing Company. We expect them to submit on Thursday of this week. So that'll be coming to you as a site plan review. We've got some other things I could go into, but I think that gives you an idea that our workload is pretty busy, and we expect the construction season to not stop. So we're excited about that.
That's great. Can I ask Andrew, Pierre, what's the status of the seniors center up Broadway? If I remember correctly, we had sent that back to staff for architectural
The Placerville
revisions and
Commons
improvements.
project.
Yeah, so is there anything happening with that? Did they ever?
Yes. In fact, I've been meeting with the property owner, Mr. Walls,
Okay.
who presented before you. He has provided revised elevations for our review, and they do consider maybe not 100% of the various issues that you wanted to see, but I think it's a good 99%
Okay.
with the variable roof lines, the different features in terms of materials, the articulation.
I mean, this project in some ways is similar to that. You
Mm-hmm.
can see how they've clearly broken that all up, and so big
Their-
difference.
Their project, I've seen the elevation. In fact, he will be coming back before you. The way you phrased the approval was not for your approval. You wanted just him to come back to you and kind of explain
Okay.
what they came up with. And that was going to happen on the 2nd of June, 2nd. But we don't want to just hold the meeting for him when it's not really an action item. It's more of an informational item for
We
you.
could have had that in bylaws, but that's up to you. All right. Thank you very much.
But look, that may happen, yeah.
Okay, if that's it. then
Chair Lowry, I have two more quick items. I just want to bring to your attention that at the City Council meeting of April the 28th, the council adopted a resolution of intent to amend the zoning code to allow for the keeping and regulation of hen chickens on residentially zoned parcels. So that's basically the council telling staff to go forward and develop some draft ordinance language, and that will be coming before you sometime in the future, probably a couple months out. And then on May the 12th, the City Council adopted a resolution of intent to amend the city code to allow and regulate outdoor sidewalk and street dining areas within the public right-of-way. And a good example of that is Pizza Bene, where they have that fenced enclosure. And you probably have seen on Main Street, people, some of the businesses put out tables and and chairs for their customers to sit. So we're going to be regulating that in the very near future, and you'll have hopefully the opportunity to review and comment on that as well.
Okay, well, that should be interesting given the ex post facto situation that exists. But is there any other business to come before the commission tonight? Okay,
Just a
meeting
photo.
adjourned.
Just a photo.
Oh, okay.